We see some alarming statistics that fertility rates are declining the world over. It is estimated now that between 1 in 5 and 1 in 6 couples will have difficulty conceiving. We know a lot of things impact these figures, but one of the undeniable contributors is the environment around us. We are exposed to levels of toxins within our environment that our grandparents never were. So what impact is this having on your body, your overall health, and your fertility? Today, we sit down with one of my favorite experts in the fertility space, and she's going to unpack exactly what is going on and how you can support yourself best when you're trying to conceive. Welcome to Your Journey to Fertility. This is the podcast that blends both science with spirit to give you all the tools you need as you navigate your fertility journey. I'm your host, Jennifer Edmonds, and for the last 15 years, I've been helping women on their journeys to motherhood and beyond. I believe that combining the latest scientific research along with the best energetic and mindset practices will help you to avoid putting your life on hold and bring you closer to your baby. Here each week, you'll learn ways to support your fertility and trust your body so you can stop stressing that you'll never have a baby and finally walk your path to motherhood. This is the Your Journey to Fertility podcast. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. This is an episode about something we do not speak about enough, and that is how all of the toxins in our environment are affecting us. Before I went through my own journey of struggling with fertility, I never gave a second thought to some of the personal care products and the cleaning products that I would buy. I would get whatever shampoo was promising to make my hair the shiniest, or whatever product would make my bathroom be less moldy, whatever it was. And I think that my kitchen was full of plastic, and I'd have no second thoughts about throwing a plastic container in the microwave to heat up food. And I had no idea what an impact all of these things had on my body and my overall health. And the changes that I noticed when I started to remove them were huge. And that is why I wanted to bring Lucy onto the podcast today to speak about this, because when you get into it, it is scary. We are speaking to Lucy Lines, who you may have come across also before on the podcast. She is a wonderfully outspoken voice for the fertility community, and I can absolutely attest that she is as passionate and knowledgeable in person as she comes across online. So I really hope that you're going to get a lot out of today's episode. Lucy is a global award-winning fertility educator and IVF patient advocate who also worked for many years as a clinical embryologist. Through her own personal 10-year battle with infertility and recurrent pregnancy loss, she realized the importance of information and education for people on this journey. With such a strong science background, honestly, I've never met someone get so excited about research papers before. Lucy really knows her stuff. So everything that she speaks about today is backed by science and many, many years of clinical knowledge. So no matter where you are on your fertility journey, this is the information that you need to know about. And not just for your own health and your fertility now, but for the health of your future family as well. So let's get into it. Here's Lucy. Lucy, it is so good to have you back on the podcast. I know how wonderful and amazing you are, and I think that a lot of my listeners do. But just in case you are new to anyone who is listening today, can you share a little bit about who you are and what is the work that you do?
Surely people are sick and tired of hearing who I am, but I am Lucy. I am the founder of Two Lines Fertility. I started my career as an embryologist back in the year 2000, worked clinically in labs with eggs and sperm and embryos for a number of years in Australia and in Europe before finally having a baby after some difficulty and moving out of the lab and into a company that manufactures and markets products to IVF clinics. So then I was in and out of lots of IVF clinics throughout Europe and the UK, supporting those IVF clinics to improve their success rates, obviously using the products that we were trying to sell. And then moved back to Australia and took up a position in another large IVF company out talking to GPs and educating them about their fertility patients and the things that they could do to support their patients in the primary care setting before finally moving out of that and into Two Lines Fertility when back in 2017 when I had my son after 6 years of recurrent loss. So a combination history of clinical experience in the lab, experience in more of the sales and marketing side of IVF clinics, and my own experience with infertility and recurrent loss have all culminated in Two Lines Fertility, where I provide independent fertility guidance and support to people, helping them understand their IVF specifically, but also to fill in the gaps from high school health ed and all the bits that were missing, and then add on a whole lot of extra bits so that people feel confident and empowered when they're dealing with infertility.
Thank you. And it's not just the stuff that was missing that we didn't get told in high school, isn't it? I find that when you're going on this journey, it's all the things that your clinic or your doctor isn't telling you either. Do you find that a lot as well?
Yeah, so the doctors are amazing. They can manage your stimulation protocols. The analogy I use is like baking an apple cake, right? If you want to bake a really nice apple cake, you need to have all the right raw ingredients and you need someone to pick the apples. The doctor is the person doing the final watering of the trees and picking the apples ready for that apple cake. But what's really important when we're making an apple cake is the kind of apple tree that you planted in the first place and how it was fertilized and looked after in the first place. And then what happens to those apples once you take them into the kitchen and try and bake an apple cake or a human being from those raw materials. So the doctors are really focused on that final stage of gathering up those eggs and getting them ready for the embryology team to create human beings out of them. But there's a whole lot that gets missed, and the doctors just don't have time to explain it, which is why people like you and I exist. And I mean, overwhelmingly, most people will actually conceive in the first 12 months of trying. 80% of people will actually conceive in the first 12 months of trying. Another 5 or 10% will conceive in the second 12 months of trying. But there are definitely things that can be optimized and changed that the doctors probably just won't talk about because they just don't have the time because they're so hyper-focused on that last little bit.
And I mean, it makes sense. You've got to be good at what you're good at. And that is their training and that is what they're there to do, right? And yes, that is why we are grateful that people like you are around so that we can fill in those gaps, as you say. And what I really wanted to speak to you about today was this idea of the environment around us having an impact on our outcomes. So whether you are trying to conceive at home naturally or you're going down the assisted route of IUI or IVF treatments, there is so much that we can do to not only ensure that you get pregnant and stay pregnant, but that you have a healthy baby. I think that is a thing that gets missed as well. Like we've got to get the pregnancy test, we've got to get those 2 lines, but no, you want a healthy family, right? And I think this is where a lot of the work that you do comes in.
Yeah, so there's a heap of stuff that we do in preconception that influences not only the chances of conception or the outcomes of that IVF treatment if you're doing IVF, but the health of the baby at the other end. There was studies published years ago now, I couldn't even tell you what year, where they showed that children born from fathers who smoked in the preconception time had a higher incidence of childhood cancers. Now, this is guys smoking in the time before conception. So in the 2 to 3 months before the egg and sperm even met, children born from those conceptions have a higher incidence of childhood cancers. Now, when I meet people where the male partner is smoking, I'm like, I'll be stuffed if I'm going to go through all of this and then sit by my child's bedside while they deal with a childhood cancer. Like, hell no. So really simple thing to do. And then, it's simple for me to say, give up smoking. But, there are ways and means of doing that, but it's a really important step. But if we know the impact that something like smoking can have on the incidence of childhood cancer in the resulting child, that gives us an indication of how important this preconception time really is, preconception for both the eggs and the sperm, and the impact that has on the outcomes of the whole thing, which is, your child. And you want a healthy child. You want a child who grows up and doesn't have heart disease or diabetes or obesity or, all sorts of other things that we know are influenced by preconception health.
When you're speaking about smoking, I feel like this is one of those duh, we know that we shouldn't smoke, and not just for preconception health, but for overall health. And we know things like...
But you'd be amazed how many people I meet who are...
And vaping.
Vaping. because they think it's better. I'm like, no. You need to see some of the data on that. And we see the influence that has. So, yes, we think it's a well, duh, but it is not. There are so many people I meet who are like, but my semen analysis was fine. I don't need to do anything. I'm like, yeah, but you do.
But you do. And we will absolutely get into, I think if we can touch on that a little bit later, that would be very helpful. But some of the things that are less obvious, so not smoking, not alcohol, that are a problem. I always found it fascinating. I remember when I was going through IVF, and as I got into the more procedural stuff in the lab, in the surgery room, so you're the scientist here, Liz. I was told I'm not allowed to wear deodorant. I'm not allowed to wear perfumes. My husband was the same, like hard no. Yeah. And I always thought that was a bit weird. And I asked them why, and they explained that it can have an impact on the embryos, the potential embryos or the eggs that you collect. Yet we live our lives full of these chemicals. So where do we even start? So all my questions, I have so many, Luce, but what are the things that we need to worry about? How are they impacting us? And what are we going to do differently?
So there's a whole lot of things that we're exposed to all the time that are impacting how our hormones work. And I cover this obviously a lot in my programs, but as a kind of an intro to that, all of our hormones work like a lock and a key. So they all work. The hormone itself is the key, it fits into a very specific lock, and that lock then is on the organ that needs the information from that hormone. So, and they all work in the same way. These chemicals that have been identified through research, there's a group in the EU who have identified over 1,400 known endocrine disrupting chemicals. They work in a couple of different ways. They can either mimic the hormone, or they can block the lock so that the actual hormone can't lock there anymore and can't pass on its message, or they can erroneously fit into the lock and activate the response without the actual hormone being present. So what that does is effectively, if we think of hormones playing like a symphony orchestra, we've got a whole symphony orchestra playing in front of us. These hormone disrupting chemicals are like gremlins running around turning the microphones up and down on all the instruments in the symphony. So it's making the whole symphony sound wrong, which is going to mean that things don't happen the way that they should. And so this is going to disrupt things like sperm development, egg development. It's going to impact on a cellular level the very specific messages that need to happen when the egg and the sperm meet each other and when those embryos then subsequently develop, which is going to have knock-on effects on the health of the child.
So what are some of the ways that we are getting exposed to these chemicals?
So, just through living your normal everyday life. And when people ask me this kind of stuff, they get really frustrated because they're like, oh, well, my doctor said to avoid plastic, so I avoid plastics. Or my doctor said to avoid BPA, so I avoid BPA. But all the plastics I have are BPA free, and so it's fine. Or, there's a number of really top line advice that people give. But the real key is to actually inform yourself what these things actually are. And it's not that difficult if you start, at the beginning and follow a bit of a pathway. But we're being exposed quite simply through everything we do. Shampoo, body wash, conditioner, takeaway coffee cups, tin food, all sorts of different things. You walk into, I bought a jumper for my daughter recently that was from a very specific branded shop that she loves in Melbourne. And when we picked it up, I thought, God, that smells like that shop. And then she wore it a few times, and then I washed it. And as I was folding it, I thought, it still smells like that shop after I've washed it and it's hung on the line. And then she wore it a few times, and then I'd washed it again and I was folding it again. I was like, it still smells like that shop. And she's worn it 2 or 3 times. It's been through the washing machine twice, and it's been on the clothesline for, a day each time. And it still smells like that shop. Now, that is, without doubt, a compound called phthalates. And phthalates make scent stick around. And phthalates have been linked to a huge range of things, fills up a whole slide in my presentation, one of those things being breast cancer. So a study published a year or two ago looking at women using their normal sort of products and their exposures to phthalates in their normal sort of routines. And then they were asked to stop using those products and move to products that were known to be free from endocrine disrupting chemicals. And there was a massive, like definitely statistically significant reduction in the breast cancer marker tissue in those women who were actually previously healthy. They had no idea that they had any breast cancer markers in the first place. But when they stopped using these products, there was a significant reduction in those breast cancer markers in their breast tissue. So we know these compounds can be really bad. And so to give a sort of a top line of what it is we're being exposed to, it's kind of everything, which is why you need to inform yourself about specifically where, so that you can make informed choices about which exposures you want to reduce for you in your lifestyle. You know, if I come out with a list of all the things you needed to reduce, it would be far too overwhelming and people would just go, well, I'm not playing that game. Or they would go the other way, Jen, and they would go, oh my God, I'm going to do all of that and I'm never going to live my life. I'm going to go and live in a organically produced cotton wool ball somewhere in Nimbin and knit my own yogurt. Like, you know, we don't need to do that, and that's why it's so important to go through the process of learning where all these exposures are so that you can make informed choices about which ones you want to try and work on reducing.
That is, I think reducing is the key word there.
100%. You cannot go for no exposures because they are literally everywhere. They're in the clothes that you pick up from the dry cleaner. They're in the washing powder that you buy. They're in the shop where you buy your clothes. They're literally everywhere.
When we're speaking about fertility, how are these chemicals having an impact on your ability to conceive or your ability to stay pregnant?
We were talking about this off camera before. Very interestingly, I was at a meeting just recently where we were getting presentations from some of the latest research, and there was someone who was presenting about the impact of some of these toxins and heat stress and on the addition of microRNAs to sperm in the epididymal tract. So to break that down a little bit and make it a little bit easier to understand, when sperm are made, we have a factory, we have a warehouse, and we have a delivery system. The factory is the testes, the warehouse is the epididymis, and the delivery system is the vas deferens and the seminal glands and the prostate gland and whatever. It's very easy to think that a semen analysis, we look at, you know, how many are there and what they look like and whether they're moving fast enough and, you know, we get some information and we put a gold star and say everything's fine. But what we can't see from that is the mechanics of those sperm. So this presentation was really about the purpose. This scientist is trying to work out what is the purpose of the way this system is designed. Is the epididymis just a warehouse, just a holding place, or does something cool happen in the epididymis? And what she discovered was something really cool happens in the epididymis, and she was obviously drilling right down into a very tiny little aspect. But one of the things that she established is that sperm get these little microRNAs added to them. So we've all heard of DNA. DNA is what we inherit from our parents. It's what determines whether we have blue eyes or brown eyes or blonde hair or brown hair or tall, short, blood type, whatever. MicroRNAs are more involved in the epigenetics of the resulting embryo. So these microRNAs get added to the sperm, and the sperm then deliver them to the egg to determine which DNA, which genes get turned on and off in that embryo. And this is happening as the sperm pass through the epididymal tract. And the composition of these microRNAs that get added to the sperm through the epididymal tract is influenced by heat stress, oxidative stress, and exposure to environmental toxins. Will influence what kinds of microRNAs get added at that point. And that will then obviously, you know, those microRNAs get delivered to the egg by the sperm and determine which genes get switched on and off in the resulting embryo. So we can see that pathway really clearly of the impact that environmental toxins are having on, and heat stress and oxidative stress, on the development of the embryo and the health of the baby at the other end, because the these microRNAs are determining which genes get turned on and off.
Mm. It's pretty scary when we break it down.
And when you think about it like that, it's very easy to get frightened, Jen. It is very easy to go, oh, my God, what is going on? And I'm not going to lie. Sometimes I'm in the supermarket and I look at people's shopping trolleys and I think, people still buy this crap. Like, what is happening? But we have to pull the lens back a bit and go, okay, we've got to actually still continue to live our lives and live in the real world and carry on and, you know, work and eat and go out for dinner and have fun and go to the gym and do these things. But once you start educating yourself about where these exposures are and the impact that they're having not only on your chances of conception and the health of your baby at the other end, but on your own whole body general health as well, then you can start making educated choices about which ones you want to try and reduce. You know, I was in my IVF WTF program group last night with my members in that group, in the current group, and I was talking about this study because it's fascinated me so much and I need to pull it out and really dig into it. But one of the girls said that she hasn't actually started her IVF yet. She's due to start in a couple of weeks, but she started the toxin stuff because part of the IVF WTF program is this detox program as well. And she's started doing all of that. And she's already, you know, we're only in week 4. She's already noticed a massive impact on her endometriosis symptoms. So she said up until 6 weeks ago, she was virtually in hospital every month with her endometriosis symptoms. And for the last 2 cycles, she's had 2 cycles since we've been talking, she's noticed barely a twinge because the change was so quick once she knew what things to start reducing her exposure to. So the impact of reducing exposure to toxins is exponential. And if you look at it from a very big picture, there are some, you know, really general health things, impacts that you're going to see. And from a much more drilled down perspective, the science is there to back this up. The addition of these microRNAs to the sperm impacting which genes are turned on and off in embryos is just like, whoa, this is super cool. But also
it's super cool. And it's so empowering when you see those really tangible things that give you feedback as to how these changes are affecting your body. I find that's the thing, when people can see and feel changes.
And that's the thing people, you know, in my external life away from fertility, you know, my family, my brother, my sister, whatever, they have a tendency to go, roll their eyes a little bit when I start talking about toxins, and they're just like, oh my God, but I'm fine. I'm like, yeah, you're fine. But also you're not, because also there's this, your headache, your eczema, your asthma, your kids with endometriosis, with PCOS, with, you know, all of these things we still consider ourselves to be fine in inverted commas, but actually we're not. I presented at a perimenopause event last week, and the change in people when in their perimenopause symptoms, when they start reducing exposure to environmental toxins, is also amazing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of across the board. I know I've kind of moved away from the fertility bit, but it's very, very general whole health stuff.
But that's important. I mean, when we do zoom out and we're able to see what impact this is going to have in our lives in a big way, I think that's where people get really motivated as well. Can I ask you, I love how much you speak about sperm health. I absolutely love it, because I remember how many different fertility clinics did I see, and they did a semen analysis on my husband, and that was like, you're good to go. This is not looking so great this month. We'll do ICSI. You'll be fine. And so I love how much you talk about that. And that's such a big topic that we do not talk about enough. So thank you for that. But I do also want to ask you about the impact that it has on women, and specifically egg quality. I know this term egg quality really is very much thrown around, and a lot of people who are these like experts on egg quality, but are these toxins having an impact on egg quality, and how is that affecting us?
100% yes. Simple answer. Much longer answer, because you know that's me and I love to over-explain things. But I think it's really important for people to feel like they've got that base knowledge so that they can then grow from there. So in the 3 months before an egg is ovulated or eggs are collected in an IVF cycle, the egg is undergoing its final stages of development. Now, obviously, we're born with all the eggs we'll ever have, but roughly 3 to 4 months before an ovulation, a bunch of eggs start growing up towards that ovulation, and all of them except one will die out. If we're doing IVF, we try and encourage more of that particular cohort to keep growing. But in that 3 to 4 months, the egg is doing its final stages of development. And part of that is to have a little practice run at replicating its own DNA and spitting out one copy of that DNA, because when the egg and the sperm meet, we want one copy of chromosomes in the egg and one copy of chromosomes in the sperm so that the resulting embryo has 2 copies, right? So the egg has a little practice run of replicating its own DNA and then spitting that out. And that process is very involved. And, I could throw a whole lot of words out there that mean nothing to anybody, but one of the really important structures in that process is a structure called the spindle. And the spindle gathers all the bits of genetic material together on a little, like an equator of a barrel, and then so that they can evenly divide and the right number of chromosomes can go one way and the right number of chromosomes can go the other way. Now, if we're interrupting that process, that spindle development, then the wrong number of chromosomes go each way, and we end up with a chromosomally imbalanced egg, which is going to result in a chromosomally imbalanced baby. Because if we have bits that aren't right in the original set of DNA, that's just going to carry on. It's not going to correct. So that's just one way that these exposure to these chemicals can impact just one little facet of that development. There are thousands of things that happen in the egg in that 3 months before ovulation or before the egg collection. Millions of little processes that happen, and all of them can be impacted by the external environment. So when the egg develops its, I remember I talked before about lock and a key, and the hormones work like a lock and a key. So the instruction to start growing is from a hormone released from your brain called FSH that is a hormone. And it is the key that fits into a lock on the egg and tells the egg to start growing. So when the egg starts that process 3 months before ovulation, it grows a lock for that particular key. And when it grows that lock, it also grows locks to all sorts of other things. So it's suddenly exposed to way more of your lifestyle than the eggs prior to that 3-month thing on the timeline. You're born with all your eggs. Most of them sit in your ovaries doing absolutely nothing. They're locked off away. They can't see anything. They don't even notice what's going on. But once they start that final stage of development, then they're exposed to everything you're eating, drinking, and doing. So, and as soon as I start talking about this, there are always people who say, oh, but what about the crackheads who get pregnant? Or what about the alcoholics who get pregnant? Or what about my sister's, aunties, cousins, best friends, cousin's neighbour, whatever, dog's first owner, who got really drunk and got pregnant and her baby's fine? Yeah, sure, absolutely. Not all of these toxins are going to have a massively detrimental effect. And one single exposure to alcohol as a toxin or phthalates or whatever is not going to have an effect. That's why the research around this is so hard to get your head around, because most of the research focuses on one single exposure and whether that has an impact in the long run. But if you think about your normal daily life, the average woman will use 12 different products before she leaves her house in the morning. By the time she's had a shower, she's used shampoo, body wash, conditioner, then she's used face cleanser, toner, moisturizer, skin prep of some sort, makeup, mascara, whatever. The average woman will have used 12 products before she even leaves her house in the morning, 168 ingredients on average. Now, not each of those is going to be a problem, but if you think about it in that kind of context, what we're looking at here is a massive onslaught to your hormone, your endocrine system that is going to have impacts. So particularly in that 3 months before an egg collection. Can we improve egg quality? 10 years ago, if you'd asked me that question, I would have said, no, you're born with all the eggs you'll ever have. You can't do anything about it. Now, with all the research that we have, I would say in those 3 months, if we can make a difference to some of the exposures that the egg has in that time, and by that I don't just mean reducing exposure to stuff, I mean increasing your body's innate ability to naturally detoxify, which is covered in the program as well, then we can bring that balance back somewhere and have a much more optimal environment for those eggs to grow up in, which just might have a big impact on how those embryos then develop. Mm. And if nothing else, it's going to have an impact on how you feel about it, because it's going to have an impact on your moods, your sleep, your ability to exercise, your ADHD symptoms, your perimenopause symptoms, if you're in perimenopause, as most women are once they reach about 38 or 35. It's going to have an impact on your nutritional status. It's going to have an impact on so many things. Like it's actually got to the point where I think it's verging on unethical for IVF clinics to let people do IVF without this kind of knowledge before they start.
I would like to just highlight that sentence and, really get people to think about this from the perspective of it has been scientifically shown to make such a difference. And
over and over and over again.
Over and over and over again. And, clinics will say to you, well, in the 3 months that you've just spent prepping for IVF, well, you've lost how many more eggs and your chances are so much more reduced. What would you say to that?
Bullshit. Quite frankly,
Liz, thank you.
I would say that in 2020, all IVF clinics, pretty much all the way around the world, had to shut down for minimum 3 months. And the research that came out of that time showed us that even in women over 40, a 3-month delay was not a problem. It did not have a negative impact on outcomes, especially where that 3-month time was spent working towards more optimal egg health and sperm health. If you spend that time focusing on reducing exposure to toxins, improving nutritional status, improving your body's natural ability to innate ability to detoxify, and improving your ability to manage and handle the normal everyday stresses of life plus the stresses of IVF, not just relax, but finding ways to actually balance out the stresses of life and manage them. If you spend that 3 months doing that, I don't have a randomized controlled clinical trial to prove it, and I'm a scientist, so I have a lot of trouble actually spitting out the words of. I'm so sure that that is going to have a massively big impact on the outcomes of your IVF. And again, that's a big statement. As I said, I don't have a randomized controlled clinical trial to prove it. I'm working on it. I'm gathering the data. But my anecdotal data would tell me that, the first 20 people who did my Detox WTF program for fertility, 6 of them achieved a pregnancy. And I think out of those 6, 4 of those were a spontaneous pregnancy after multiple cycles of IVF.
Wow.
So, and healthy babies are being born. Actually, one of them is due this week, being born now from that program. So I can't reiterate it enough. And again, as one of my members said last night, when her family are going, oh, what are you doing? She's like, seriously, there's nothing difficult about what I'm doing. There's no reason to not do it. And yeah, it might not make a difference, but it actually might. So why would I not try?
Mm.
It doesn't mean that I have to turn my life upside down. I can fit this into my normal life. It's real world solutions for real world people. I'm not telling you to turn your life upside down. It's just learn what it is where these things are, educate yourself, and then make informed choices. Don't just blanketly go, oh, I'm reducing exposure to plastic, or read It Starts with the Egg and scare the crap out of yourself. But just learn this stuff and then make some educated choices about what you want to do.
This is maybe a bigger question than this conversation can probably hold. But, the more I learn about toxin exposure and all of the research around phthalates and BPAs and plastics, why are companies allowed to use these ingredients, Luce? Why are we still using them?
It's a great question, and one I ask all the time. And like I said, I actually said this in my presentation last week. I'm sorry if you see me at the supermarket surreptitiously taking a photograph of your shopping trolley, because it still blows my mind that these products are still available. It blows my mind. The issue is, and if people are concerned about this, they should definitely watch a movie called Stink, S-T-I-N-K, Stink. You'll find it on YouTube. I think it was on Netflix for a while, but I think it's moved to YouTube now. But it's about a guy who his wife died of breast cancer. And when she was going through the process of her treatment for breast cancer, they learned about the impact that these things can have on cancer proliferation and whatever. And then after she died, he bought his children some pajamas online like they'd done every year for their birthday, for Christmas. And when the kids opened them, they had a distinct scent. And he thought, what actually is that scent? And so he went down a rabbit hole, and that's what the whole movie's about. He went down this rabbit hole trying to find what were the components of that fragrance. Now, fragrance is a word that's protected by intellectual property. Companies don't have to tell you their ingredients that they use to create their fragrance. So it took him a long time to find what these things were. But in the top 5 ingredients of the fragrance, when he finally had them tested by a lab and whatever, were 2 known carcinogens that are banned from use in the US, yet they were in this product that he had purchased online in the US, because these ingredients for fragrance are not required to be disclosed. They don't have to tell you. So he went down the rabbit hole of going to the big companies like Palmolive and you know, I don't want to name too many of them, but the big companies, and actually asking them, following them around like a 60 Minutes show, going, you know, do you have children? Do you have grandchildren? How can you sleep at night? How can you do this to our future, to our, you know, how can you do this? And they're just shutting him down. The reason that a lot of these companies will give is because when you look, like I said before, if you look specifically at one single phthalate or one single bisphenol, and BPA is one of them, but there's a number of others, or one single PFAS chemical, and there are over 10,000 chemicals in the PFAS category, and you look at that single chemical and its impact ongoing, you won't find one. So then they say, well, that chemical is fine. The thing is, when you pull them all together in the way that we are exposed in a normal day, it's too much and our bodies can't keep up. So, you know, with BPA specifically, if we reduce our exposure to BPA and we consciously go, right, I'm going to reduce my exposure to the class of chemicals called bisphenols. So that includes BPA, BPS, BPF, and then a couple of others. If you consciously decide that you're going to reduce your exposure to those, in as little as 4 days, you can reduce your urinary output of BPA by over 40%. So we can make significant changes very quickly if we know what we're looking for, which is going to alleviate the toxin burden on our liver, on our kidneys, on our organs of natural detoxification, which is going to mean that they can deal with the exposures that we can't control much better. So the way I look at it, and I talk about this in my program all the time, the way I look at it, it's like a bathtub with a whole lot of taps on at the top. And if you don't know what all the taps are, then you can't make choices about which ones you want to turn down or turn off. And the obvious ones, as you said right at the beginning, alcohol and smoking and vaping, they're the obvious ones. But there's a whole lot of others that are just not obvious. And it might be like, you know, one of my clients who said, no, I'm not going to give up my daily Diet Coke. I love Diet Coke and I'm not going to stop doing that. Okay, cool. That's a tap you can leave on. Maybe you can turn it down a little bit, but you need to think about, then you need to interrogate what other taps are on so that you can turn some of them down so your butt doesn't overflow.
That's it. It's the choices. And I love what you do because it is so empowering. And it's so simple, as you said, Luce. It is simple.
It's really just a matter of educating yourself about this stuff. Now, if you hear that word and you're like educating, oh, I gave up school, don't want to do school, or whatever, fine. If you start Googling endocrine disrupting chemicals, you are actually going to end up rocking in the corner. Like the information about endocrine disrupting chemicals available on Google is overwhelming, very disempowering, terrifying, and makes you just want to, as I said, curl up in a ball in the corner. It's not going to be helpful, which is why I pulled this program together to make it really sensible and logical so that, you know, people can understand it and make informed choices. So you're not stupid. Anyone listening to this is not stupid. You're capable of learning this stuff. You could do what I did and spend 2 years digging down all the research and going into PubMed and pulling out all the data and trying to discern what was real and what wasn't, and then make your choices based on that. Or you could just simply go, oh, I'm just going to reduce my exposure to plastics, and maybe that's going to be enough for you. But if we think holistically whole of life stuff, getting this information from someone who's spent years pulling it together and applying it to your life, or finding ways to apply it to your life in a sensible and logical kind of way, is going to have knock-on effects on your whole of health. And I mean, you and I have talked about this before, Jen, but this is why I deliver it live every time I do it, because, I mean, you can get a pre-recorded version of it, but I love delivering it live because every single time I deliver it, I make a little change myself, and I'm 5 years down the journey. I spent years curating this information and pulling it together, yet still every time I deliver it, I go, I'm ready to make that change now. I wasn't previously ready to change my dishwasher powder, for example. It took me 2 years to change my dishwasher powder. And then one day I went, now I'm ready. And so it's that continuum. I talk far too much. This is a podcast, though. You're supposed to talk a lot.
I'm just asking the questions, Liz. That's what you're here for. So thank you. So tell us more about the program that you'll be opening this month. Who is it for? What can they expect? And give us all the details.
Okay. So the program is the IVF WTF program. So IVF WTF originated as a filling in the gaps of what the hell is actually going to happen in my IVF program, in my IVF treatment. In the last 12 months, I have added the Detox WTF program to that whole program because I know how important it is and how fundamental it is to the outcomes of IVF. So the program is for pretty much anyone who is doing IVF, about to start IVF, considering IVF. I've even had people do it who are like, I'm never going to do IVF, but I need to know what I'm choosing against. So I can't just blanketly say I'm not doing it. I need to actually know what it is before I decide I'm not going to do it. That program, the IVF WTF program, includes the Detox WTF program. So it walks people through each room in their home. So we start with week 1, which is all about food and the various exposures we get from our food. Week 2 is about food preparation and storage. So how do we prepare our food? What kind of takeaways are better than others? How do we make choices around how we store our food? Week 3 is personal care products. So all of the products that you use in the bathroom and where those exposures are likely to come from and what better choices you can make. Week 4 is home cleaning, household cleaning. Week 5 is air quality. And week 6 is all about future fertility. So the impact that the exposure to these toxins in the preconception and during pregnancy stage is having on that child's likelihood of developing low sperm count, cryptorchidism, which is where the testes don't descend, hyperspadias, which is where the urethra doesn't come out in the right place, endometriosis, PCOS, all of these exposures are linked to all of those things in the lifetime of the child as a result of that conception. So each week there's a video, there's a checklist, and there's a safer shopping guide for people to be able to feel confident in the supermarket about making the choices that they're making about what they put in their trolley, thus reducing the chance that I'm going to take a photograph of their shopping trolley and out them on Instagram.
Thankfully, you live in a small town.
I know, right? It's unlikely to happen to most people who are listening. But, if you live in a small town in South Australia, you just might find me in the supermarket outing your shopping trolley on Instagram.
Thank you. And I want to point out for everyone listening that if you want to learn more about Lucy's work as an independent fertility educator and give you information around what your IVF cycle means in terms of how many eggs collected, how many fertilized, at what rate did they stop growing, etc., please go back and listen to the last episode that Lucy did with me a few months ago. I will link it in the show notes, but that is where she goes into detail about what clinics don't tell you during the IVF process. Hugely informative, and that's covered within your program as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. So the IVF WTF program takes people through how do they do the egg collection? How do they know when to do the egg collection? What does fertilized egg and not fertilized egg mean? What are we expecting to see on day 2, day 3, day 5, day 6? How do they grade embryos? How do they decide which ones to freeze? How did they freeze them? How do they do biopsy? Should I do biopsy or should I not do biopsy? All of those questions that buzz through people's heads when you're doing IVF are all covered in the IVF WTF program. So in the current group, I was chatting to the members last night, and they were all just like, I just can't believe people do IVF without this information. Like, I can't believe that people think that they're getting enough information from the clinic and that they can just, in inverted commas, do IVF. If you are handing over your life savings for IVF, don't go in unprepared.
And I wish I hadn't, Luce. No better words to finish on than that. If people have questions about the program or they just want to learn more about you, where is the best place to get in touch?
So Instagram is where I hang out most. I know I should be on TikTok, but I'm not. So you will find me on Instagram at 2linesfertility. You will also find me on my website, www.2linesfertility.com.au. If you are interested, if you just happen to be listening to this, or you know someone who's listening who could benefit from the toxin stuff who's not interested in fertility, this toxin stuff, I've talked a lot today about the impact it has on endometriosis symptoms, on mood disorders, on all sorts of different things. If you can think of someone in your life who might benefit from that, then they will find me under lucylines.com.au, where I talk specifically just about toxins and reproductive health in general, not so much about the fertility side of things.
Thank you for clarifying. Lucy, thank you for everything that you do and everything that you share. And you do give away so much information. You educate people so much on your social channel. So on behalf of all of us, thank you. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
I love chatting with Lucy about all things fertility. And because I've been lucky enough to meet her in person a couple of times, I can attest to the fact that she's just as awesome and passionate in person as she comes across online. So I really hope that you got a lot out of that episode. As she mentioned, her signature program, IVF WTF, is opening for enrollments this month. Please see the link in the show notes if you want to learn more and to get all the details as to how to register. Now, next week on the podcast, we are talking about how to overcome fear on your fertility journey. I think this was the biggest overarching emotion that I dealt with when I was struggling on my own journey. There is so much that goes into fear, and it has such a huge impact on your life, your behaviors, and your thoughts. So I am looking forward to having you back next week for that episode. But until then, I am sending you all my wishes as you continue your own journey to fertility. The most common thing I hear from students who are on their fertility journey is that the stress of trying to conceive has taken over their life. Your days end up being filled with endless appointments, navigating pregnancy announcements. You're trying to eat right, take all your supplements, and it is all you think about from the moment you wake up. I designed the Element Fertility Yoga course to support your body, your mind, and your mental health in 3 important ways: to synchronize your hormones, increase circulation and blood flow, and to help regulate your nervous system. But on top of this, the greatest gift that you can give yourself throughout this journey is a sense of peace, to help you calm your mind and just make this process feel easier. Every single one of my students tell me that this is the first thing they notice after starting a yoga, meditation, and breathwork practice. But on top of this, you have the amazing benefit of actually supporting and increasing your fertility. Studies have shown that those participating in mind-body programs as they're trying to conceive have success rates 3 times greater than those who don't. The course I've designed walks you through natural conception as well as fertility treatments and IVF cycles. And the best part is you can work through it at your own pace in the comfort of your home. The practices start from just 10 minutes per day. To learn more, visit elementpilatesyoga.com or see the link in the show notes.